Hello and welcome to another episode of James Dean Designs. Now in today's episode we're talking about linear rails. What are they? What are the benefits? And will you even see the difference in the outcomes? Now this applies to linear rails in general, but for the purpose of this video I'll be using the FoxAlien XE-Pro, which has a base model and a linear rail upgrade kit. However, we can't technically start the video here. We are starting here before any upgrades have even been done, obviously with the exception of the Makita router. Now what I've done is put the machine through a stress test where we have seen how deep it can go in various materials in one single pass using different bits on each material. And I'll walk you through them now. Softwood pine using a 2-flute downcut bit, 9mm deep in one single pass. Hardwood oak using a 2-flute upcut bit, 8mm deep in one single pass. Onto the acrylic using an O-flute upcut bit, 6mm deep in one pass. I'm trying to remember all these off the top of my head. And onto the aluminium using a 3-flute upcut bit, again 6mm deep in one single pass. And before we go further, I was really impressed that it was able to go so deep in one single pass in soft metal. Now if you've seen the full review of this video before of this machine, you will have known that I ended up tightening up all the wheels on this machine as tight as they could get. So basically I took out all of the play possible, and the reason I'm telling you this is ultimately because these are then going to be the best results of the defects that we could achieve. And what I mean by that is I'm not trying to deliberately produce bad results on this to make the linear rails look good. It's kind of the opposite. I'm trying to see how good we can get this machine to see if there is much difference with the linear rails. But obviously with all those tests done, we now have the base reference to go off and we can start to do the upgrade on this machine and get the linear rails installed. And just like that, the linear rail kit is installed. Now obviously there is an element of disassembly, but the reality is it's a fairly easy process, especially because of the things that FoxAlien have thought about, such as putting the guides on the existing axis to make sure the linear rails fit in nice and easy. So yeah, generally overall, very simple process. You may also see that I've resurfaced the spoil board and trammed the machine in again, just to make sure that the old and the new are on level playing fields before we repeat the same test. Now before we dive into that, let me just take a second to talk to you about the actual benefits of linear rails and why they do improve the overall value of the machine. First is the overall rigidity of your machine when it is running. Obviously we're bolting steel rails down, which help, but ultimately it is about the carriages that slide on those rails. There is no play or movement going on in them, and ultimately when you minimize the play or wobble going on in a machine, you're going to get better quality cuts. Now in the previous segment I mentioned about tightening the wheels down that much on the machine. I had taken out all of the play that I possibly could. So you could sort of argue at this stage they are on equal pegging terms, which leads me on to my next point, which is wear and tear. Now if you imagine the amount of pressure being applied to those wheels on the rails, and we ran this machine for a couple of months straight, over time it would start to develop a little bit of play and wobble. And ultimately that's where these again have the advantage. Because of the way they are designed, the way they run, there is minimal friction and pressure going on within the carriage itself. So the reality is, yes, they may have started off at a similar point in terms of minimal movement, but over time these will last much longer and they require very little maintenance. But the bottom line is, well, ultimately, as I say, the wear and tear is minimal, so the amount of play you're going to get over a longer time is also going to be less. And the third point, which I technically should have run an experiment with before upgrading it, is I actually believe linear rails are a little bit quieter. As I say, because there is less friction going on as opposed to those wheels being clamped really tight, it should run smoother and a little bit quieter. So ultimately, it's not just comparing cut for cut, which is all we're really doing in this episode. It is considering the longer term effect as well. These are going to run much smoother, much quieter for a longer period of time. So it's more of an investment than just an upgrade. You know, you're planning for the future by putting these on as opposed to having the original wheels that came with the machine. But with that out the way, let's dive in and get some of the original tests done and see what the differences are. So with the test completed, it's time to take a closer look at the results. Now, I said earlier on, this is essentially a best case scenario versus linear rails. And to be honest with you, I was that impressed with the initial results and the initial cuts, I wasn't even sure we would notice much difference with the linear rail upgrade kit being in place. But actually, the more you start to compare the results, you can see the difference. Now, the images I'm showing you on screen at the moment are from the setup without the linear rails. And you start to notice little bulges going on on in the corner of the deeper cuts. Now ultimately these either come from tool deflection, or what is actually more common is the wobble in the machine. Now as the machine gets to the corner and goes to change direction, it slows down, and this allows the machine to return to its natural position, as I say, before changing direction, and ultimately causes those bulges in the corner. Now if we take a look at the photographs with the linear rail set up on exactly the same settings, same material, you will notice that those bulges hardly exist in the corner, and actually if they do exist, it is more likely then to be tool deflection as opposed to machine deflection. And when you put them side by side, it really does become apparent. Now this isn't only just in the corner, actually you take a look at the quality of the cuts themselves, and the setup with the linear rail does come out cleaner overall. So yeah, even in a best case scenario versus linear rails, well, you can still see the difference between the two setups in the machine. Now the average person may look at this and go, oh, that's hardly noticeable, but this isn't about being the average person. This is about getting the most out of your machine. You can run it faster, you can run it deeper, and you will get better results with better precision. And obviously precision really counts if you need parts that are going to be fitting together, lids on pots, if you're machining metal, that type of thing. So yes, ultimately the linear rail upgrade kit is definitely worth it, or linear rail upgrades in general are definitely worth it. I do hope you found the video useful and learnt a little bit more about linear rails. Obviously if you are interested in this machine and the upgrade kit, please check out the affiliate links in the description area below. They do not cost you any more and will always take you to the best available price for any machine that I am showing. I may just get a little bit back ultimately, that helps keep the channel running. Thank you all very much for watching. Final thanks always goes to my patrons. I appreciate all the support I get from you. See you all on the next episode.